"Next class, I'd like us all to think about it like a strong breeze," said the man at the front of my classroom. His voice boomed through the lecture hall as his chalk tapped and scratched against the board. "Imagine this stick figure is a man. These lines will represent our wind of time. Time flows as we know it linearly. It passes us by." He drew long, wavy lines going through his stick figure, then tapped on it with his chalk firmly. "This man is here in the middle, currently experiencing the wind. This will be the present. The wind that's in front of him, which he will feel but cannot yet, is the future. And the wind he did feel but cannot any longer is the past?" "The past, thank you, Elizabeth. Now up to the front of the class, if you will, please." Elizabeth got up from her desk and stepped to the front. Mr. O'Neill was known as the cool teacher at Alder High School, the kind who always had some sort of prop or experiment. Everyone, myself included, leaned forward in their seat a little when she was called up, and a box was produced from under his desk. "Here you are, go ahead and take one, then pass it on." Elizabeth walked back with a puzzled expression. "This little project I've been working on is one you get to take home with you, class." Immediately, most of the class began to quietly chatter as the box was passed around, and I saw it was full of hourglasses. By the time the box got to me in the back, there were only a handful shifting inside. I grabbed mine and inspected it. It was dual-toned, with one half being white and the other a dark gray, and the whole thing was about as long as my hand. The white side was made of white plastic. The darker side was made of a textured metal and was heavier than it looked. The whole thing must have weighed a couple of pounds. If you Google it, I'm sure you could do the homework in 3, maybe 4 minutes. But I'm hoping that you take the time to do it yourselves, as it will help you understand what I have planned for tomorrow even better," Mr. O'Neill said, making a few poignant glances at select students. I had been caught copying my friend's homework in the past, so I was unsurprised when his gaze met mine. He then turned back to the board and drew a chalk circle around the stick figure, just barely big enough to cover it. Above it, he wrote Earth and underlined it. "Tonight I'd like each of you to use a stopwatch, either with your phone or otherwise, to time how long the sand in the hourglass takes to fall. I'd like one measurement with the heavy side down, then another with the heavy side up, and a third with the hourglass lying sideways." In an instant, my hand went up in the air, along with a dozen more. I couldn't see many faces from the back, but I was sure everyone looked as confused as I was. "Mr. O'Neill, how do you measure an hourglass on its side?" I asked. He didn't turn around, just stepped to the right and started drawing another, even bigger circle with just lines in it. "Mr. Henderson, do you plan on doing the homework yourself this time?" he asked in response. A couple of people, including my friend James, snickered. No one spoke because they expected him to continue, to answer me, but he didn't. "After you get the first 3, open up your textbook to pages 227 and 230. Here you will find simple formulas that allow you to calculate how long they would take on Jupiter, and..." He finished writing Jupiter over the large circle and quickly drew a third, smaller circle behind the stick figure. "The moon." The class remained quiet, the only noise now the scratching of pencils writing down the assignment in notebooks. I didn't bother raising my hand again. I was planning on waiting until class was over to have a chat with him. "Have we all heard the one about the tree falling in the woods with no one to hear it?" he asked. When he was content with the number nodding along, he continued, "If nothing exists to be affected by the passing of time, can it still exist? Or does time only exist when there is something able to perceive it? Is it possible for us to..." The 21st bell interrupted, causing everyone to start getting up. Mr. O'Neill threw his arms into the air, saying, "I'll finish that thought tomorrow. Please do not forget to return my hourglasses." I got up and began to walk down to the main floor to confront him. I wasn't the only one. A small group walked with me. When I got to the bottom, though, I couldn't find him. The rest of my classmates and I looked around a little, but he was gone. His phone was still on his desk and his computer was still on, but there was no sight of him. After a few minutes, the last bell rang, signaling that I was running out of time before my bus left. That night, I didn't bother to do my homework. The next morning, Mr. O'Neill did not show up to work. He had not responded to emails, his car hadn't left the lot, and his phone still sat on the desk. I was one of 36 students in his class, and I was one of only 4 who made it back to school the next day. Overnight, 32 students and our professor vanished. The police were called quickly before the first period was complete. Over half of my homeroom was absent. Once parents were called, everyone realized no one knew where my classmates were or when they had disappeared. Of course, I didn't know any of this right away. First came the interviews. Most students in our grade were interviewed, and the cops were quick to realize that all the missing students shared one class, Mr. O'Neill's. And then the buzzer rang and class was over. I tried to find him after class to ask, but I think he stepped out when everyone was moving around, so I couldn't find him. Okay. And after that, you got right on the bus and went home? Yes, sir, I responded. Was the bus ride home typical for you? The officer asked. I think so, yeah. After that, I kind of just messed around the rest of the day. About what time was it that you got home? I think around 2:30. The officer spent a minute or two writing on his pad of paper, the blinking light of the recording reflecting in his glasses. I was painfully aware of the cold metal hanging loosely on my wrist. I didn't remember being cuffed. You're sure you didn't see Professor O'Neill leave the classroom? The officer asked. That's right, sir. Back and forth, the officer and I went. He asked me about what time things happened, how close Mr. O'Neill was with his students, and other mundane things I expected. There was only one question I didn't have an answer to. On its side, how did he expect you to measure that? I'm not sure. I tried asking, but he didn't answer. My friend James emailed him, but he didn't get a response either. So what did you do for that section of the homework? I didn't do the homework. At that point, for the first time in the interview, the officer looked me in the eyes. You didn't do it either? He asked me. Our eyes didn't lock for more than a moment before he looked back down at his paper, writing more notes. Either? Is that important? I asked. He didn't respond. A few minutes later, I was sitting with 2 of my classmates, James and Maria. Maria's twin brother was in the room behind us, the last one to be interviewed. My mind was still on what the officer said. Did you guys not do the homework either? No, how'd you know that? Maria asked, raising an eyebrow at me. She was the first one to be interviewed. James gave me a sheepish grin. I never did hear back after that email, he said to me. Well, Officer Mike asked me if I did it, and when I said no, he said, you didn't either to me. So I guess none of us did? Yeah, he asked me too. Don't really get why it's important though, James said. Maria leaned back and stretched her legs, talking through a yawn. Probably just making sure we're okay, asking us regular stuff so we don't freak out. A bunch of people probably didn't do it, right? Brian did his homework though. James and I both grunted in response. We sat in silence after that, each one of us seemingly lost in thought. I reached into my backpack and pulled out the hourglass. It was still unmoved from when I first got it in class yesterday. The white side felt like cheap plastic, a thin seam running through its middle like a crappy children's toy. The darker gray side was just as heavy as I remembered. The textured metal was like fine sandpaper, and as I held it, I realized it was slightly misshapen. I looked closer around the mashed edge and saw what looked like a shallow thumbprint. Inside, there was a small, barely legible 26. I stared at that for a while. When Maria's brother finished answering questions, he spoke harshly before any of us could talk first. None of you bothered to mention the handcuffs. What the hell? Were you guys not bothered by that? I didn't get cuffed. Why did you? James said. You didn't? Maria asked him. No, why would I be? No way we're suspects, right? Alex? James looked at me expectantly. Brian looked more exasperated than upset. I got cuffed too, man. Maybe it's procedure? They didn't say why, and you didn't ask? Brian said pointedly. No, I didn't, I responded. We all just looked down at our feet, unsure of where to take the conversation next. Brian took a seat next to his sister, and we all waited until Officer Mike emerged from the classroom turned interrogation room. "All right, sorry to keep you all waiting. I appreciate your patience. We're gonna go ahead and get you kids home now. James, your dad is outside waiting for you. Duval's, your parents are already in the lobby. Alex, you said your parents are away for a while, so we can give you a ride. Do you have a way to give them a call?" 15. "Oh, I'll go with James," I said. Maria was already walking down the hall towards the entrance to the school, but Brian lingered. He looked at James and me, and I could tell he wanted one of us to ask his question for him. Officer Mike's eyes met mine, and he raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, sir. Have a good day." Both Brian and the man sighed, both for different reasons. "Thanks, kid. You too." James and I walked out of the school and towards his dad's car outside. His father waited patiently for us to get into the back seat before speaking to us. He didn't turn to look back, just looked into his rearview mirror. "You boys okay?" he asked through a thin-lipped smile. We both nodded. "You sure?" He followed up. We nodded again. "Okay." And then he drove us home. "What do you think happened?" James asked. I blinked and saw the band poster on his basement wall. I didn't remember the ride ending, just the passing of houses and trees, and the daytime moon hanging over them. "You there, Alex? Come on, man, you're too quiet." "Oh yeah, what? Sorry, I spaced out." James sighed exaggeratedly, stepping over the dirty shirt on his floor and making his way to his desk. "What do you think happened to everyone?" "I'm not sure. Feels weird, though. Like 33 people are missing, but only in Mr. O'Neill's class. Feels like that makes him a suspect, but how is it even possible?" "Yeah, that's fair. Claire's gone, and her parents have eyes on her basically 24/7. If she so much as opens her bedroom window, her dad knows it. And last I heard from her was right after she ate dinner. Said she'd message me after doing her homework." "You hear from her parents?" I asked. I could tell he was trying not to show it, trying to act aloof, but he was worried about her. "Kinda, but not really. I called her phone just to see if she'd pick up." Her dad answered. And he was a wreck. Sounded like he'd been crying, and his voice was all choked up. I was gonna ask if he knew anything, but hearing him like that, grown-ass man, didn't feel right to pry. I just said I hope she turns up safe, and said goodbye. His voice began to quiver. He turned his back to me, grabbing something off his desk with one hand and raising the other to his face. I think he was wiping a tear away. I tried and failed to find words to comfort him. "You know what I think?" he asked, turning around after clearing his throat, hourglass in hand. "Probably not," I replied, raising an eyebrow. "What, seriously, you've been holding on to that thing for what, almost 2 hours now?" At first I was confused, but with a shock I realized he was referencing the hourglass, still in my hand. I never put it away after taking it out of my backpack. I responded to him without looking, my eyes still locked on the sand. "So what do you think?" "We go for a walk. Alder High, classroom 301. 02. "What?" I asked incredulously. "Dude, no way his class isn't yellow taped out the ass right now." "Wanna bet? His house maybe, but his work desk?" I bet the cops took a quick look around, got bored, and moved on. "I'm not so sure." 28. 32 kids, Alex. I bet that's more people missing than they have cops. Sure, his desk is probably important to them, but I bet everyone's homes, the last place they were seen, is a hell of a lot more. I looked up, holding his stubborn gaze for a while. I could tell he was serious. "Besides," he added, holding up his hourglass, "don't you want to know what he had scheduled for today's class?" And he was right. I did want to know. I really did. So when his parents went to bed, we set out for our school. It was bright outside, despite how late it was. The moon was full and gleaming, with no clouds to obscure it. The air was warm, but I still felt a chill as we slid open a window on the back end of the building. We'd done this a few times over the 4 years we went to Alder High. Once just to see if we could. Then every time after that to climb up on the roof and pretend we were cooler than we really were. This time, instead of making our way to the maintenance ladder leading to the roof, we walked the route we take 5 times a week towards Mr. O'Neill's classroom. The empty hallways echoed our footsteps, the sound of other kids' only memories as we walked. The school doesn't employ any security, but as we drew closer to the class, we slinked cautiously anyway, keeping our eyes open for any police. 23. Once we were sure the room was as empty as the hallways, we opened the door and made our way down the steps. As if the school itself had ears, neither of us talked, just made crude hand signs, most of which were misunderstood by the other, none of which bore any real importance to the task at hand. Despite the heavy air that settled onto the empty seats, James and I tried to maintain some level of unseriousness, as if it helped things feel easier somehow. 30. We shone our phone's flashlights in front of us, scanning for anything eye-catching before deciding to dig deeper. On the surface of Mr. O'Neill's desk, we saw his computer, now in sleep mode, as well as some ungraded papers. His phone was gone, presumably taken by the police as evidence. His desk stood like 2 hip-height file cabinets with a thin sheet of metal welded on top. We looked around for a few minutes before trying to open any of his drawers. Most of them held more paperwork, boring nonsense the school forced him to apply to his lessons, as well as blank slips to be signed for any reason he pleased. One drawer, however, was locked. The very bottom drawer on the right-hand side was locked using a key that we could not find. "Think the police took it?" I whispered. "Nah, I think he took it with him, like on his keychain or something," James replied. "Or at least it must have been taken with him." 07. "Well, I don't see any lesson plans outside of the boring stuff the school made. You find anything with today's date?" James shook his head at my question, furrowing his brow and putting his hand on his chin. "Can't find anything referencing this little assignment either," motioning his other hand to the chalkboard. It still bore Mr. O'Neill's drawing of a stick figure in the wind, encapsulated by the moon, the earth, and Jupiter. 20. "Maybe it's all at his house?" I proposed, half asking. "Shit," he cussed. "Yeah, I think you're right. He wouldn't have the time to do it here. He probably does it at home." A moment of silence passed. James and I both lost in thought. I couldn't get past an overwhelming feeling that I was missing something. The air in the class felt stiff, stale with the breath of hundreds of students previously attended. When the silence was broken, it wasn't by me asking if we should head to the roof, like I was about to. It was broken by the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. The footsteps were slow, methodical, lingering. Footsteps that sounded very much like ours. Footsteps that did not belong here. James and I didn't waste time looking at each other, just leapt as quietly as we could manage into the supply closet. The closet was both unlocked and spacious, thankfully. James closed the door, but not all the way. He left it open just a crack, obviously planning on peeking outside. We had left the door to the classroom ajar, and I heard the low creak of someone slowly prying it open further. In my head, I cursed that the person would enter this specific classroom. But before I could hear them take the first step, James jumped out. "Brian, the hell are you doing here?" Immediately, Brian screamed like a girl and tripped on the top step, tumbling down a few feet before catching himself. He was pale, even in the absence of light. Once his eyes focused on us in the darkness, his panic and fear turned to anger. He scrambled upright and glared at us, presumably trying to find the words to convey just how much he hated us. Eventually, he settled on flipping us the bird, beginning to walk down the steps and saying, "I want to check out O'Neill's desk. Why are you two here?" "Same reason, I guess. It's all pretty boring, except for a locked drawer," I said. 08. "You find a key?" "Nah," James replied. "I figure he keeps it with him." Brian made his way to the bottom step, landing himself a few feet in front of the desk. Neither James nor I said anything as Brian began to sort through our teacher's belongings. We just watched. He worked his way through all the same papers and drawers that we did, before landing on the last drawer on the right. 24. The drawer rattled as Brian tugged on it. "Doesn't seem too strong. I bet we could force it open." What? I asked. They'll know we were here. What's in there can't be that important. Hey, Brian? James asked, looking bemused. Yeah? 27. Does Maria know you're here? Why didn't you bring her? At that, Brian froze. In the light of my phone, I could see his knuckles turn white as he gripped the handle of the drawer. He turned his head upwards, just barely enough to stare daggers at James, and said, "Funny, asshole." What? Screw you, what's your problem? Don't call me an asshole, man. You know my problem, asshole. And I'll call you an asshole as many times as you act like one. Whoa, chill, Brian. The four of us were all fine earlier today. What happened? I said, taking a step in between the two of them. Four? Brian asked. Yeah, you, me, James, and Maria. Brian didn't let me finish my sentence before he stood up, his face only a few inches from mine. You saw my sister today? When? Did you tell the cops? Where did you see her? Brian spat his questions out, rapid and poorly strung together. James and I both shared a look, one somehow bearing confusion and understanding in equal parts. 10. Brian, James said. She was with us today during the police interview, remember? No, she wasn't. It was just the three of us, Brian responded. James and I stood gawking at him, realizing that he believed he was telling the truth. Just as we stood looking at him, he stood looking at us, wearing the same expression. As sure as we were that his panic was real, that his sister was missing, our genuine confusion seemed to tell him the opposite. Brian did not ask any more questions. Instead, he sat down on the ground and grabbed the handle of the locked drawer once more. This time he put his feet against the desk and tried to pry it open with all his might. With the help of his legs, the lock didn't last more than a few seconds before popping open with an audible crack. The three of us almost bumped heads as we shoved ourselves forward to look in the drawer. Inside was a stack of manila folders, each labeled with a date during the school year. The folder on top had a date that I was fairly certain was the first day of class, and inside we found the syllabus, as well as a few other introductory papers. Each folder down was a later date, some the next day, some the next week, or later. We stopped looking inside the folders after a while, and just placed them out of the way as we dug deeper, closer to today's date. At the bottom of the pile we saw it. Brian grabbed the one from the day before, and I held the folder with today's lesson on it, the one that Mr. O'Neill said the hourglass would help us understand. Huh, I murmured, opening mine first. There was one paper inside the folder for today's class, and from what I could garner, it was not a class lesson. It was just numbers. 19. 25-12-03, 26-09-22-13, 08-28-32-15, 02-17, 06-19, 04, 05-33-30, 10-11-23-24-27-21, 07-20-29, 01, 31-16, 18-14, 33. It's mostly just what we already heard in class, Brian said, except for this sticky note. He peeled the note off one of the papers inside his folder, handing it to James, who stood looking over my arm at the numbers. James held the note close to my folder so we could all read them together. The note was in my teacher's handwriting, scratchy and half cursive. Certain words stood out, underlined, and others he went over multiple times, thickening the lines of the letters. It read, "The past is odd, but the future is even stranger." The hell does that mean? I wondered. Maybe something to do with what he started to say at the end of class? Before the bell? James asked. I'm not sure, Brian replied. I don't see anything about that in this folder, just the homework assignment and some bullet points about the lecture. 25. Hang on, let me see. James took the folder from his hands and opened it up, skimming through. Wasn't he talking about time yesterday? Like if it can exist when nothing sees it or something? That's not in either of these folders. Maybe it's like we thought the fun stuff is at his house, I replied, shutting the folder. 05. 22. No, wait a second, James said, grabbing the folder out of my hands and propping it open on his forearm, reading the contents of both folders at once. He bolded odd and even, right? I think that has to do with the numbers on this paper, and maybe the past and future are the moon and Jupiter. Like he drew on the board? I wonder if we were going to use the numbers from our homework to figure something out. 18. 32. Both of us looked at Brian. What? He asked. You did the homework, right? Do you need help remembering your measurements? I didn't do the homework. What? I snorted. Maria said you did, though. I regretted saying it before her name left my lips. Brian glared at me and took a step closer. He was a couple of inches shorter than I was, and noticeably lighter, but the anger in his eyes couldn't tell the difference. How do you know that? 04. I already told you. She was with the three of us earlier today. I'm sorry, I know you said she wasn't, but I don't know how else to explain it to you. Did you lie about it? Why? Asked James. 12. Yeah, he responded. Brian dropped his gaze to the floor, brow still furrowed. I told her I did it. Didn't have a reason to lie, just didn't want her to think I couldn't figure it out, I guess. I jumped a little, not expecting the sudden noise. James had set his hourglass down on the desk, heavy side up. His phone was in his hand, clock app open to the stopwatch. What are you doing? I asked. Doing the homework. Why? 09. I'm not sure yet. It just feels like I'm missing something, like there's something here that we aren't getting. Feels like the homework is important, but I don't know how. Not yet anyway. 01. I nodded, not saying anything. I had been feeling the same way, like something more was going on. An entire class missing overnight, with not a single witness, was impossible. It felt obvious to me that something more strange was going on, but without understanding what, I couldn't begin to ask why. The first pass of the sand through the narrow opening was 40 seconds. James flipped it so the heavy side was down and began to measure again. Brian walked over, maintaining the silence, watching the sand run. The second pass took 38 seconds, faster than it should have been. After that, James picked up the hourglass with care and held it sideways in front of his eyes. Do you guys think I should leave all the sand on one side or spread it between both first? 29. One side, I think, like an hourglass normally is, I responded. I still had no idea how measuring it on its side would work, but I didn't ask questions. Brian and I stood close to the desk, cautious not to touch it in case we ruined his measurements. Something didn't feel right. I watched him lower the hourglass back to the desk, but before he set it down, James's eyes popped in the dim light, and he exclaimed, "Wait!" The word coated my brain like a slick jelly. I knew something was wrong, but nothing was out of place. I felt anxious, like I was waiting for something to happen, something I was not looking forward to. There were no windows in the class, but I glanced up without thinking about it. For some reason, I expected to see the stars overhead, to see them gleam in the dark, encircling a beautiful full moon, lighting up the night. Instead, all I felt was vertigo. 11. For what? Brian asked. What? I replied. You said wait. Wait for what? He responded. I didn't say wait. Oh, I thought I heard something. Yeah, I replied. Me too. I traced my fingers over the edge of the manila folder in my hand. I thought I had set them down. I didn't remember picking them back up. The two of us stood in silence for a moment, stretched uncomfortably long. Well, this was a big bust. I think I'm gonna head out, Brian said. 13. 14. Me too. Can you help me put all of this back? Brian helped me reorganize all the folders and place them back in the drawer, making sure to place the dates in order, just like Mr. O'Neill wrote them. There was nothing we could do about the lock, so we hoped for the best. 17. That yours? Brian asked, motioning to the hourglass on the desk. It lay on its side, devoid of sand. No, I have mine in my pocket. Was that there when we got here? I replied. 03. Oh, must have been then. Mine's at home. My eyes lingered on that hourglass. I knew something was missing, but I wasn't sure what. Trying to think about it felt like running my tongue along my gums, searching for a tooth, only to find a gap in its place. Sorry, by the way, I said, closing the window behind me, outside the school. About your sister, I hope they find her. Thanks. Me too, he said, without turning back to look at me. We walked in the same direction for a while before splitting off, without a goodbye. As I walked, I still couldn't get my missing classmates out of my head, couldn't get James out of my head. I ran yesterday like a movie inside my mind again and again, trying to find something that stuck out. Anything. I pulled out my phone, rereading the last text that James sent me the night before. Can you hurry up? I still need the bathroom. I stopped walking. I read the send date. 06. I reread the text. 5:45 this morning. My hands started shaking gently as I held the phone, trying to cut through the thick fog clouding my memory. I didn't remember seeing him at all today, just last night. However, this text implies that we spoke this morning. More than that, it implied we were together this morning. I looked up, the realization hitting me like a sack of bricks, headache included. My house is almost 10 miles from the school, outside of town, a 3-hour walk at least. Not on my life would I decide to walk it, and my parents were out of the country on a work trip. I couldn't rely on them for a ride. Where the hell am I walking? I asked aloud. I was wearing different clothes than during school. I didn't have my backpack, and my phone was mostly charged, but I didn't remember going home, so what did I remember? I walked over to a bench and sat down, throwing my head back and groaning. The further I tried to reach into my memory, the harder the beat inside my skull pounded. I focused my eyes on the half-full moon above me, trying to piece together a puzzle. I must have slept at James's house, but as far as I knew, he went missing last night. Without thinking, I pulled the hourglass out of my pocket. I felt its heft in my hands, the uneven weight of the strange design. The pale sand sat in the bottom half. I opened a stopwatch on my phone. Officer Mike seemed interested in me not completing the homework, like there was a chance it could be connected to the disappearances. It felt stupid, but alone on the bench, under the moonlight, I decided to do my homework. I flipped the hourglass and measured the sand running from the metal side into the plastic one. 31 seconds. Then I flipped it again. 31 seconds. They were the same, something anyone would have predicted. Obviously, the weight distribution, at least one this small, would not affect how long the sand took. So why did it feel so wrong to me? I expected one side to be faster, like I already knew that should be the case, but the hourglass just functioned as normal. I flipped it to its side, holding it in the air in front of my eyes. Again, against what I expected, nothing happened. I'm not sure what I thought would happen, why I would expect the sand to flow. I lowered my hand and rested my head back, looking up again with a sigh. 31. Unfortunately, my train of thought was derailed when something got into my eye. Muttering a curse, I rubbed my eye and looked up through a squint. I saw little sparkling specks in the air, drifting down like tiny flakes of snow, pale white, meandering their way to the ground. It wasn't just above me, it was all around me, raining dust like ash, the crescent moon illuminating every speck. That was wrong. The crescent moon. It felt wrong at least. I held one hand above my eyes, shielding them. It should have been full tonight. In a vacuum, the moon being in a different phase would be alone to freak me out, but my eyes caught the sight of something I found horrific. The hourglass, having been set down and rested on the bench, was empty. 16. The hourglass held my gaze, a slickness coating my brain, numbing my headache. I felt afraid, but I didn't know why. It never had any sand in it. I knew that to be a fact, a provable and immutable fact. But what I knew did not change how I felt. As I held my hand out like I was trying to catch snow, I tore my face from the hourglass and looked at the moon one more time. It was only a sliver in the sky, just like I knew it should be. Caught inside the palm of my hand, shifting in the breeze, was nothing but sand.